Throughout the 1970s till today, numerous alien abductions have been reported. Jim and Jack Weiner, Charles Fultz, and Charles Rack claim they were abducted by aliens during a camping trip near Alagash, Maine on August 20th of 1976. According to the four men, hypnotic regression enabled them to recall the experience of being taken aboard a UFO, then probed and tested by four-fingered beings with almond-shaped eyes and languid limbs.
My friend Linda and I were sitting at the computer late the night before she left to go back to Abbotsford. She suddenly said to me, "Why don't we go stargazing?" And I mentioned to her that it was getting quite late. It was, around midnight. I was really tired. Could we possibly think about doing this the next time she was up? But she really insisted on going.
The women got into Karina's car and pretty soon found themselves on a back road, looking for a secluded area, shielded from the city lights. Karina was new to the area and wasn't sure where to find a good spot for stargazing. They soon found themselves on a road that runs between Kelowna and Vernon. There was no moon that night, so it was very dark. Karina stopped her car somewhere beside Kelowna's landfill. Karina pulled out a large spotlight she had in the car and pointed it down the road ahead of them. As Linda watched through her binoculars, she noticed a group of 3 stars in the shape of a triangle. She pointed them out to Karina. Neither of them could figure out what the lights could be. They both agreed on one thing. They weren't lights from a plane. There was no engine sound. The lights started to move ahead of their car, changing color from white to green. The air, which had been warm, turned musty and cold. It took a second for Karina to register what they were looking at. These weren't anything from this planet, staring back at them from out of the dark. They began to move towards the 2 women. They ran back to the car as fast as they could, but it was like moving through quicksand. It was as if the whole world around them was slowing down to a crawl. Karina remembers having a hard time getting her hands to open the car door. Once they were inside the car, she tried to get it started. The lights inside the car flashed on and off randomly. It was as if the car had gone crazy. Karina finally got the car started and sped back towards town. As they drove along, Karina remarked to Linda that she felt weird, as if electricity had been zapped through her whole body, as if by a charge from a battery. Linda took comfort from the fact that they both felt the same way. That's when she looked at the dashboard clock. As they continued their drive home, Linda commented on the time. The women felt they hadn't been out of the car for more than a few minutes, but according to the clock, it had been almost an hour. Where did that missing time go? Suddenly, they both saw another large orb low in the sky on the far side of a field. Karina stopped the car. Could this be one of the same orbs they had seen earlier? Karina tried to convince Linda the orb was just a low-flying aircraft or helicopter. But even with both windows down, neither one of them could hear any noises from the mysterious orb. It started to move further away from their vehicle. To prove her point, that it was just a plane, Karina held up her spotlight out of the car window and flashed it 3 times directly at the orb. To her horror, it stopped dead in midair, then came flying down directly at them. Terrified, Karina panicked and took off down the road. She headed for home, trying to ignore the celestial object high above. The next morning, as Karina got out of bed, she discovered a large bruise on her left breast. She also felt nauseous and had severe head pressure. As she sat at her kitchen table drinking coffee, Linda joined her. Linda also complained about feeling sick, and suddenly, her right nostril started to bleed.
Oh man. Well, that is really.
Karina grabbed a towel and tried to staunch the flow of blood. After they'd stopped the nosebleed, Linda left to take a shower and clean up. Karina's daughter then came down to the kitchen. She too felt nauseous and complained of a stuffed up nose. Then, just like Linda, her nose began to gush blood from the right nostril. Karina helped her stop the bleeding, and not wanting to alarm her daughter, she told her nosebleeds can happen when someone feels sick.
I don't know.
But she suspected that her encounter the previous evening hadn't ended at the front door.
My whole family were going to bed 11 o'clock, and I looked out the window of my bedroom and I saw this green shimmering light in the sky and billowing clouds, a small point in the sky, maybe 500, tops 1,000 feet in the air. So it was well within our atmosphere. And the smoke was billowing out and green shimmering lights behind it. I called to my mother. The sky is green. And she comes in and she looks, sure enough, the sky was green. And pretty soon my whole family, my parents, my sister, and myself were out on the front lawn. So it was summer because we were still in our pajamas and house coats. Father didn't know what it was. My mother said, "It's the second coming." Very religious woman, and she thought it was the second coming because none of us had any clue as to what it was. But it was a huge craft, perfectly silent, huge round lights of various colors, none of which were FAA standard, and just sat there. And then we looked off to the left, and here's a little funnel cloud of smoke coming down. And it was later, my sister just didn't pay any more attention after that. And under hypnosis, it was revealed that this little tornado of smoke that came down had a smaller craft in it. And small gray beings came out of that craft, took me, and then took her. She remembers them taking me and then taking her to be examined. She doesn't know what happened with me, but she knows what happened with her. And then returned us. And when we don't know if our parents were taken or not, because when she was returned, I was back on the lawn, and so were my parents. We were all just looking up, like we were frozen in time. Okay. And then I can only assume this is the missing time phenomenon. Okay, so when we were all back in place, we were switched back on, so to speak, and the craft had departed. All that was left was that smoke. We're watching as the sky seemed to be giving birth to this huge craft. The lights were there, and it just kind of came through a vortex, and that's why I believe that the extraterrestrials come from other planets and or other dimensions through a vortex. They instead of going from point A to point B, they fold time and leave their space-time and arrive at ours instantaneously.
By October 17th, more aliens were being seen in the South. In Falkville, Alabama, Police Chief Jeff Greenhaw received a phone call from an excited lady who said that she had witnessed a spaceship land in an open field not far from town. Greenhaw went to investigate and took his Polaroid camera. About 10 p.m., he made it to the location of the alleged landing. He found no trace of a spacecraft, but returning from the sighting location, he saw a silver-suited, tinfoil-covered creature on the road. The tinfoil alien's movements were very mechanical-like. Greenhaw managed to snap off 4 pictures of the odd-looking alien. When he turned on his headlights, the alien ran. Greenhaw immediately took pursuit, but because of the rough terrain, he was only able to manage 35 miles per hour. Greenhaw could not keep up with the strange being, and it escaped into the night. He said it was running faster than any human he ever saw. Greenhaw would soon regret the whole affair. He was mocked and ridiculed by many of the townsfolk, and he received threatening phone calls. His house was burned down, and his wife left him. About a month after the incident, the town council fired him. Greenhaw eventually regained a normal life, but he would always regret the night he met the alien. It should also be noted that on this same date in Loxley, Alabama, Clarence Patterson claimed he and his pickup truck were sucked up into a huge cigar-shaped object with a green light. He claimed he was pulled out of the truck by about 6 robot-like beings who he thought could read his mind. He noted a sulfury smell and lost time, then found himself back on the highway going about 90 miles per hour. Patterson estimated he may have been on board for about 30 minutes. (1973) will be known as one of the most active UFO flaps ever investigated. Multiple UFO and humanoid reports coincided with historical events during this unusual year. Many states within the United States received a record number of UFO reports and activity, and all remain unsolved encounters to this day. The FBI was asked to investigate and refused involvement in the UFO phenomenon. Local authorities were ill-equipped to handle the reports, and many simply stopped investigating them. As one police officer stated, "Chasing lights in the sky is not our job. Let the Air Force do that." The military had officially ended their involvement in 1969 with the closure of Project Blue Book. However, it is known now that they continued to focus on UFO activity. On November 28, 1973, a Gallup poll showed that 51% of Americans believe UFOs are real, 11% claimed a personal sighting, and 93% were aware of the subject matter. If the UFOs did anything at all, they made themselves aware to the general public. After 1973, UFOs would appear more and more in popular culture, and sightings would never cease. Though UFOs had been around since man could document them, 1973 heralded a new awareness of the phenomenon and would mark a new increase in UFO popularity. It was the year of one of the largest UFO activity flaps ever to go on record, and it was not solely an American phenomenon. Worldwide, UFOs were being seen and reported. There are far too many cases to report in one program, but several stand out. Betty and Barney Hill were an American couple who claimed they were abducted by extraterrestrials in a rural portion of the state of New Hampshire from September 19th to September 20th of 1961. It was the first widely publicized report of an alien abduction in the United States. The incident came to be called the Hill abduction and the Zeta Reticuli incident because the couple stated they had been kidnapped by aliens who claimed to be from the Zeta Reticuli system. Their story was adapted into the best-selling 1966 book, The Interrupted Journey and the 1975 television movie The UFO Incident. In September 2016, plans were announced to make a film based on the events with an unknown release date. Most of Betty Hill's notes, tapes, and other items have been placed in the permanent collection of the University of New Hampshire, her alma mater. In July 2011, the State Division of Historical Resources marked the site of the alleged craft's first approach with a historical marker. According to a variety of reports given by the Hills, the alleged UFO sighting happened on September 19th of 1961 around 10:30 p.m. The Hills were driving back to Portsmouth from a vacation in Niagara Falls in Montreal. Just south of Lancaster, New Hampshire, Betty claimed to have observed a bright point of light in the sky that moved from below the moon and the planet Jupiter upward to the west of the moon. While Barney navigated U.S. Route 3, Betty reasoned that she was observing a falling star, only it moved upward. Since it moved erratically and grew bigger and brighter, Betty urged Barney to stop the car for a closer look, as well as to walk their dog, Delcy. Barney stopped at a scenic picnic area just south of Twin Mountain. Betty, looking through binoculars, observed an odd-shaped craft flashing multicolored lights travel across the face of the moon. Through binoculars, Barney observed what he reasoned was a commercial airliner traveling toward Vermont on its way to Montreal. However, he soon changed his mind because, without looking as if it had turned, the craft rapidly descended in his direction. This observation caused Barney to realize this object that was a plane was not a plane. They quickly returned to the car and drove toward Franconia Notch, a narrow mountainous stretch of the road. Approximately 1 mile south of Indian Head, they said the object rapidly descended towards their vehicle, causing Barney to stop in the middle of the highway. The huge, silent craft hovered approximately 80 to 100 feet above the Hills' 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air and filled the entire field of view in the windshield. It reminded Barney of a huge pancake. Carrying his pistol in his pocket, he stepped away from the vehicle and moved closer to the object. Using the binoculars, Barney claimed to have seen about 8 to 11 humanoid figures who were peering out of the craft's windows, seemingly looking at him. Red lights on what appeared to be bat-wing fins began to telescope out of the sides of the craft, and a long structure descended from the bottom of the craft. The silent craft approached, and Barney observed the beings were not human. Barney tore the binoculars away from his eyes and ran back to his car. In a near hysterical state, he told Betty, "They're going to capture us." He saw the object again shift its location to directly above the vehicle. He drove away at high speed, telling Betty to look for the object. She rolled down the window and looked up. Almost immediately, the Hills heard a rhythmic series of beeping or buzzing sounds, which they said seemed to bounce off the trunk of their vehicle. The car vibrated, and a tingling sensation passed through the Hills' bodies. The Hills said that they experienced the onset of an altered state of consciousness that left their minds dulled. A second series of beeping or buzzing sounds returned the couple to full consciousness. They found that they had traveled nearly 35 miles south, but had only vague, spotty memories of this section of road. After the encounter, Betty began to have a series of dreams where she remembered details of the UFO incident, including being abducted and a medical examination. Through hypnosis, both Betty and Barney separately recalled vivid memories of the encounter, as well as a star map Betty was shown by the aliens and a pregnancy test that didn't exist in 1961. Barney passed away in 1969, while Betty lived to 2004. The Hill abduction is one of the most extensive and exhaustive UFO investigations of all time. The star map Betty described was proven to be an actual map of the Zeta Reticuli star system. She drew it well before any astronomers on Earth knew it existed. Many have tried and failed to debunk the Hill case, and it remains one of the top UFO encounters of modern times. The Alagash abduction is a purported UFO sighting and alien abduction claimed to have occurred in Alagash, Maine, United States in 1976. Brothers Jim Werner and Jack Werner, with friends Charles Fultz and Charles Rack, claimed that they were abducted by aliens during a camping trip in Alagash, Maine, on August 20th of 1976. According to the four men, hypnotic regression enabled them to recall being taken aboard a circular UFO and being probed and tested by four-fingered beings with almond-shaped eyes and languid limbs. The men all claimed that when they set out fishing on Big Eagle Lake the evening of the UFO sighting, they had left a large fire burning at their campsite as a beacon to guide them back to shore during the pitch-black night. However, when they returned to the campsite, the fire had burned down much faster than they thought it should have, given the amount of time that they thought they had spent out on the water. This led to understanding the men had experienced missing time, and the encounter occurred during that time. In a later interview by St. John Valley Times, Charles Rack changed his story, saying he saw strange lights during the camping trip, but the abduction part of the story was a total fabrication, and he went along with the narrative for financial gain. The other members of the group stand by the abduction story. According to Jim Werner, Jack, Charlie, and I, after all these years, are still in agreement with the Eagle Lake event as we three remember it. We also accept the results of the hypnotic regression sessions and subsequent polygraph tests as supportive of an abduction scenario. The Travis Walton UFO incident was an alleged alien abduction of an American forestry worker, Travis Walton, by a UFO on November 5, 1975, while he was working near Snowflake, Arizona. Walton reappeared after a 5-day search. The Walton case received mainstream publicity and remains one of the best-known alien abduction stories. Walton wrote a book about his purported abduction in 1978 called The Walton Experience, which was adapted into the 1993 film Fire in the Sky. According to Walton, on November 5, 1975, he was working with a timber stand improvement crew in the forest near Snowflake, Arizona. While riding in a truck with 6 of his co-workers, they encountered a saucer-shaped object hovering over the ground approximately 110 feet away, making a high-pitched buzz. Walton claims that after he left the truck and approached the object, a beam of light suddenly appeared from the craft and knocked him unconscious. The other 6 men were frightened and drove away. Walton claimed that he awoke in a hospital-like room, being observed by 3 short, bald creatures. He claimed that he fought with them until a human wearing a helmet led Walton to another room where he blacked out as 3 other human-looking beings put a clear plastic mask over his face. Walton has claimed he remembers nothing else until he found himself walking along a highway with the flying saucer departing above him. The encounter was extensively investigated as Walton was missing for 5 days, and his co-workers came under scrutiny of murder. All took and passed lie detector tests and remained solid that their encounter did happen, even though many of the parties do not get along.
On a cool autumn evening in the South, many residents were thinking of the upcoming Mac Davis concert or football games. No one expected a UFO invasion. That would change on October 10, 1973. 15 different people, including 2 policemen, reported seeing a large silver UFO slowly fly over a housing project in St. Tammany Parish, New Orleans. The next day would be a day to remember for 2 fishermen in Pascagoula, Mississippi. It was the night of October 11, 1973. Charles Hickson went fishing with 18-year-old Calvin Parker from a pier at Shaw Peters Shipyard. The spot was an abandoned shipyard along the Pascagoula River at the southeastern tip of Mississippi. The 2 men intended to test some new fishing equipment, but had little success and were about to look for a better place. At 7 p.m. on this dark night, they directed their attention to a loud zipping sound coming from behind them. They turned around to see the source of the sound and were amazed and also terrified to see a gray-domed football-shaped or egg-shaped object surrounded by a blue glow hovering towards them.
And as I turned around from the pier and looked, something that had come almost to the ground. It was hovering probably 2 foot, 18 inches or 2 foot from the ground, and I assume Calvin had heard the noise at that time. He turned to look, and there was some kind of door, a sliding door, I suppose, that came into the end of the craft that was toward us. And a very brilliant light came out of the craft. And I didn't know what to do. It startled me at first. I couldn't make out what it was. And about that time, there was 3 things began to move into the doorway. They came out the beam of light, came right up to Calvin and myself, and one took hold of this shoulder and one of this shoulder, and I seemed to rise up from the ground about the height that they were, and we proceeded to go into the craft. At this time, I saw Calvin wanted to take hold of him, and I saw him go limp, and I didn't know at that time, but he had fainted, he had passed out. But anyway, they continued to carry me aboard this craft, and as we went in the doorway, into the light in the room, compartment, it appeared to me that it was round, and light was glowing from the overhead, from the floor, and from the walls. It was so bright I couldn't see anything at that time. But we seemed to stop about the middle of the room, and they left me. By this time I couldn't do anything because I couldn't move. The only thing I could move was my eyes. And I could tell that they had released me, but I still wasn't touching anything that I could tell. But something in front of me, in the wall in front of me, it seemed to come out of the wall. It was probably this big. It appeared to me that it was a big eye. It moved up toward my face and remained there for possibly a few seconds or a few minutes. And it moved downward. And I'm having to assume that it went under me and came up the backside, because the next time I saw it, it come over my head, came back in front of me again, remained there for a few minutes, and moved back into the wall and disappeared into the light. But at that time, that was all that I could see in the room. But several years later, after going under hypnosis regression, I could recall that there was something, some type of window there in that room. There was possibly another compartment, that there was something else in the other compartment, appeared to me. But these things left me there suspended for a while, and after a while they came back and And they took hold of me and carried me back outside, and they didn't just throw me down, they seemed to just release me, and I fell to the ground. And about this time I saw Calvin. He was standing there by the river, and his arms was outstretched like this, and he appeared to me that he was in shock. And I don't know whether he had been aboard the craft or not, but there wasn't anything with him. He was alone at that time. So I was trying to make my way to him. When I fell, my legs were weak, and after a while, shortly the feelings began to come back. And as I was trying to get up, I was making my way toward him to see if I could help him. And when I reached him, he didn't even realize who I was. He was going in shock. And I had to shake him. I even had to slap him and scream and holler to get him to realize that that we were all right. I thought that they hadn't done any harm to us physically that I could tell. But after a while, I got into where we could talk, and I assured him that I thought we were okay. But meanwhile, while this was going on, I heard the hissing sound again, and as I turned and looked, this craft, the blue lights was flashing again, and it just seemed to disappear. We went up and moved that fast.
Their heads were fixed directly to the shoulders. They had no neck, and their noses came to a point about 2 inches long. For ears, they had something similar to the nose. The mouth was just a slit. The arms looked like human arms, but long compared to body proportions. The hands were like mittens, and there was a thumb. Their legs remained together, and the feet looked like elephant feet. The entire body was very wrinkled, and Hickson stated that they could have had eyes, but he could not tell because of the wrinkly skin. The beings were a little over 5 feet tall.
So after we talked the thing over a little while, we decided we wouldn't tell anyone. We didn't know what it was or what it could have been there for. But the more I thought about it, I thought it might be a threat to our country. So we stopped at a payphone on the way home, and I called the Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, which is only about 30 miles from there. And briefly, I was telling them what happened, and they stopped me and told me that they didn't handle those things. We would have to go through the sheriff's department. Well, we talked about that, and certainly we didn't want to go to the sheriff's department. We didn't want to be called crazy or nuts in the neighborhood there. But again, we talked about it, and I just couldn't keep it. I didn't think I could keep it to myself. It was so, something happened. So we called the sheriff's department, and I talked to the sheriff, Fred Diamond. Excuse me. And he asked us to remain there, that he would send a couple of deputies over to talk with us. So after a few minutes, they arrived, and I think they at first thought we were nuts, but after they begun to realize that something had happened to us, they asked us would we follow them to the sheriff's department to discuss it. So we followed them in our car to the sheriff's department, and after talking with them several hours, they were finally convinced that something did happen. And I think what probably convinced them that something had happened to us, when we first went in the sheriff's department, they removed Calvin to a room by himself and me in a room by myself, and interrogated us, you might say. And later they came back and brought Calvin in the room with me, and they went out to get some coffee. And we didn't know they had left a tape recorder going in a desk there, and they had taped our conversation. And I think after listening to that they convinced them that something had happened to us.
That's something that could have scared you slowing down to death, Jesus Christ.
You hear about something like that, but you can't believe it.
Yeah, you hear about it. I know, Calvin, I know. But
there is something the United States can have up there.
No, something couldn't be.
They wouldn't have done no good.
Not what we see, though. Not what we see. It's something, and the Air Force and all know it's up there, too, see. And this ain't going to be the only time it's going to happen again. Until they...
This season, I'm like had a heart attack tonight, ain't she?
I know.
I come one down, ain't
I know, it scared me to death, too, something.
just laying there crying right now. I can't
Yeah, I know, but it's something that you can't get over in a lifetime, you see. Jesus Christ.
Once they down bad back, you don't nobody's leaving. That's
And I thought I had been through enough of hell on this earth, and now I have to go through something like that, see. But they could have, you know, I guess they could have harmed us, son. They could have done anything to us. They didn't hurt me.
right. Why they just picked us up?
I don't know. Don't tell me, man. I couldn't take much more of that.
Hey, I gotta get home, get to bed, and get some nerve pills or something, see the doctor or something. I can't stand it. I'm about to go off the paper.
I'll take you by the, when you get through this, we'll go by the phone. I'll get you something, settle you down with so you get some damn sleep.
I keep sleeping out like it is. I'm just damn near crazy.
But yeah, when they brought you out of that damn thing, and when they brought me out, well, I like to know when the hell, you know, God damn, I like to know when the hell got you straightened out, man.
One of them arms, I remember my arms, they just froze out just like that, and I couldn't move, just like I was stuck on a damn rattlesnake.
But they didn't do me that way, though.
I passed out. I passed out. That's the first time I ever passed out in my life. And checked the new medical records. Ain't either.
I've never seen nothing like that before in my life. It's hard. You can't make people believe that, though.
I don't know if you ever believe it or not, because I
They
never.
better wake up and start believing.
Damn
They
right.
better wake up and start believing.
Damn right.
They
It's
better
like
wake
I've
up and
seen
start
it.
believing.
I can't figure out the damn door. You see how that door come down on that stand of chair?
Yeah, I don't know how it opens, son. I don't know.
I didn't see no door swing up.
I don't know how it opens. I don't know how it opens.
Shit on it. All I know is just see
Something like
they look around and them damn blue lights and them some bitches are just like that, they come out.
Yeah, I know. You can't believe it. You can't make people believe it.
I paralyzed right there, I couldn't move.
They're gonna believe it one of these days. They're gonna believe it one of these days. Might be too late. I knew all along there was people from outer world up there. I knew all along. I never thought it would happen to me.
You know yourself, I don't drink.
I know that. I know that.
And you know the Hughes been on that boat and everything else, but I know I ain't.
Very little I drink, and I drank some while ago when I got out of that damn thing to settle my damn nerves.
Hey, that's because I took you things right. I told you one
And I'll probably take me a couple of drinks when I get in the house and make me sleep.
you something. If I thought it had my nerves, I'd go drink something right now.
When I get in the house, I'm going to get me another drink to make me sleep. Yeah,
I can, there's something I won't be able to forget.
Look, what are we waiting on? I got to go tell Blaine something. What did it say we had to wait on?
I gotta go to the house. I don't sit here and get sick down and see. I'm getting sick right here and see. I gotta go to the house.
Wait a minute, let me go talk.
So I asked the sheriff that night that I told him that we certainly didn't want any publicity about it. That I had a position in the shipyard and I had to be back at work that morning. It was almost time to go to work at that time. But anyway, he assured me that there would be no publicity about it at all. And I went home that night or that morning believing that. And I had reached the shipyard after going home and having coffee about all the time I had thing to do. But I went to work that morning, and after reaching the shipyard, and I proceeded to get my people to work and come back to my office. My telephone was ringing, and it was some news media in Jackson, Mississippi, wondering what had happened to Calvin and myself the night before. So I didn't know what to do. I just hung up on him, and it continued to ring, and someone answered the phone, and the sheriff was trying to get us to come over to the sheriff's department. That they were almost being mobbed over there. So many people was over there. So it alarmed me. I didn't, I said, well, I didn't know what to expect because I didn't know what happened. I didn't know what they were. But anyway, we went over to the sheriff's department, and it dawned on me that we could have come in contact with radiation or something. And I called their attention to that, and they carried us to the Singing River Hospital there at Pascagoula to be checked for radiation. They didn't have the facilities to do it with. So they called Keesler Air Force Base, and they told them to bring us over there. So I think they were alarmed enough that when we got there, they had MPs that met us at the gate, and they had evacuated the area that we were going into, and the area that we were going to be tested, they had protective clothing on. So they were alarmed that, that something had happened. And afterwards, after they had examined us for radiation, and they didn't find any. They said they thought they had found a little radiation on the cabin. But anyway, we went into a meeting with the top brass at Keesler Air Force Base, and I could tell in the questions that they asked us, they were quite concerned that they had asked a lot of those questions before and probably had answered similar to those before. So anyway, they told us that they would give us a copy of the meetings of that we had there, and they never did. They classified it as classified material. But later on, I obtained a copy of it from a mutual friend, from a colonel that had retired there at the Air Force. But they were quite concerned, Keesler Air Force Base was.
While the men were in the sheriff's office, a former pilot called and stated he saw a UFO at about 8 p.m. near the Pascagoula River. A former city councilor and several other people also reported a sighting. 3 different people phoned the sheriff's office to report their observation of a strange blue light in the area where the 2 men were abducted. They remained anonymous and were driving Interstate 90 a few hundred yards from the UFO landing that night. 2 days after the events, a meteorologist from Columbia reported that he had a strange radar echo the same day. He first thought it was a plane, but started to wonder when the echo remained stationary and his radar was completely jammed moments later.
Governor John Gilligan says that on Monday night, when he and his wife were driving near Ann Arbor, Michigan, they saw what might have been an unidentified flying object. Gilligan described it as vertical-shaped and amber-colored. For weeks now, there have been reports of UFO sightings in many parts of the country, but especially the Gulf Coast. Jed Duval reports.
Gulfport police have received so many calls that they've posted a nighttime watch, which officials say accounts for most sightings as ordinary earthly airplanes, like this one. 2 Pascagoula women were among 4 persons who watched something unexplainable over the shoreline near that city.
In the fog, it would give out a kind of a glow.
Those people all seem responsible, and they all say they were sober at the times of the various sightings. They all know that they saw something and cannot explain it. And along the coast, most people seem to accept the reports as sincere.
And that's the way it is. Wednesday, October 17th, 1973. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
Just a few weeks after Parker and Hickson's experience, fishermen and Coast Guardsmen reportedly played hide-and-seek with some sort of underwater metallic object with an amber light on it at the mouth of the Mississippi River. They tried to poke the object, which was close enough to touch with a boat hook, but it would turn off its light, move away to a safe distance, and then turn the light on again. It disappeared after about 40 minutes. The U.S. Navy studied the case without reaching a clear conclusion or finding any explanation. The shipyard was swarming with reporters as news of the abduction had leaked out. Keesler Air Force Base was contacted, and the 2 men were taken there where a group of doctors under security conditions examined Hickson and Parker. Their medical report indicates that both men were in a severe state of mental stress due to a traumatic experience, and that the men's report is probably correct, that no radiation exposure was found. Then the 2 were interrogated by the entire base command about the encounter. The Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization sent University of California engineering professor James Harder to Mississippi to investigate. J. Allen Hynek, a Northwestern University astronomer who just resigned from his UFO consultant job for the Air Force, also arrived. Together, they interviewed Hickson and Parker. All who dealt with Hickson and Parker in the aftermath of the encounter believed that the two men were in fact telling what they believed to be the truth. Before J. Allen Hynek left the next day, he told the press that the men were absolutely honest. They have had a fantastic experience. At a later date, Hynek stated there was definitely something here that was not terrestrial. To this day, both men affirmed the incident did happen and they told the truth. Later, Parker would admit that he did have moments of consciousness in the craft and remembered some of the events. As the years passed, both men would admit to further contacts and no longer have any fear of the beings.
The room was lit up completely, but my eyes were closed. I knew somehow not to open my eyes. There was something telling me, don't open your eyes because you won't like what you're going to see. Eventually, I did open my eyes because I could hear noise in the room. There was like scuffling on the floor. I opened my eyes. There were three small grey beings with big black eyes, big heads and very skinny, spindly limbs. They pulled me up out of the bed, and then with one behind me and one each side of me holding my elbows, walked me towards the window. And I'm thinking, well, the windows are closed, guys, so you better open them before we go any further. So there was this rationality and irrationality going on at the same time. And as we approached the window, I closed my eyes. And as I did, I felt this stickiness. It was a stickiness and a feeling of something being pulled very slowly across my face. It wasn't painful, it was just very, very weird. I opened my eyes because I felt cold, I felt wind on my face, and I was aware that I was now floating outside of the window, 3 stories up, looking down at the car park with a very bright light above my head. I couldn't really see what was above my head, I was just aware of this very bright light. One little grey on each elbow, I was aware of them, and we floated up into the craft.
Proving alien abductions is difficult without obvious physical evidence. When an experiencer is returned, all he has to prove his encounter are the fragments of memories left intact by the aliens. Though throughout the history of UFO studies, countless cases have occurred that do indeed present physical evidence, many are not aware of this, or the facts of a case are simply ignored. Details in each case often are the proof an encounter happened, but even with specific details, we're left with the account and the sincerity of the witness.
Another massive bombshell revelation presented to the committee detailed reports of the Defense Intelligence Agency's research into the biological effects of UFO sightings on humans. This entailed burns, heart issues, sleep deprivation, and reported abductions, some resulting in pregnancies. The report determined that these victims had been injured from exposures to anomalous vehicles, especially airborne and when in close proximity. The cause of the burns was determined to be electromagnetic radiation, with additional linkage to energy-related propulsion systems. The DIA issued a dire warning that whatever these objects were, they should be considered a threat to the United States interests. The report disclosed 42 cases from medical files and 300 unpublished cases of people incurring injuries following encounters with these unknown objects. Adding to this phenomena, a professor of pathology at Stanford University has been conducting tests on the brains of people who claim they've experienced a UFO encounter, and the results are very alarming. The professor has published over 300 research articles on the matter and owns 40 U.S. patents. Over the last decade, he has devoted his time to studying retrieved materials from alleged UFOs. His interest in the UFO phenomena began when he was asked by military officials to utilize his blood analysis instrumentation to aid with cases of pilots who were in proximity to alleged UAPs, and as a result, contracted horrible brain damage. When pressed if the professor could reveal the more abnormal effects on the brains analyzed with MRIs, he stated, "If you've ever looked at an MRI of somebody with multiple sclerosis, there's something called white matter disease. It's scarring. It's a big white blob, or multiple white blobs, scattered throughout the MRI. It's essentially dead tissue where the immune system has attacked the brain." He added, "That's probably the closest thing that you could come to if you wanted to look at a snapshot from one of these individuals. You can pretty quickly see that there's something wrong." Approximately 100 patients, mostly defense or governmental personnel or people working in the aerospace industry, were inspected. The professor continued, "You have a smorgasbord of patients, some of whom have heard weird noises buzzing in their head, got sick, etc. A reasonable subset of them had claimed to have seen UFOs, and some claimed to be close to things that got them sick. The research into this phenomena further revealed that the victims had an overconnection of neurons between the head of the caudate and the putamen. The caudate nucleus is a pair of brain structures that constitute the basal ganglia. It aids in high-level functioning that includes planning movement, learning, memory, reward, motivation, emotion, and romantic exchanges. The putamen is a large structure located within the brain. It is involved in an extremely complex feedback loop that prepares and aids in movement of the limbs. Signals are transmitted through the caudate and putamen structures to the motor thalamus, brainstem, and motor neocortex, which helps the body with all aspects of physical movement. Sadly, approximately a quarter of the MRI patients who claimed they had a UFO encounter died from their injuries, and the majority were found to have symptoms identical to Havana syndrome.